when I teach, but I just start to mumble. Okay, here we go. All right. Hello. My name is Matt Kogener. I'm Zoe's caseworker and special education behavioral resource teacher. Excuse me. I would like each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us your role in this meeting. Go ahead, Tara.
I'm Tara Collins. I'm the school social worker.
I'm Nana Frazier. I'm the gen ed teacher.
And I'm Jessie Hauk. I am Zoe's foster parent.
Jesse, this is a copy of your procedural safeguards. These safeguards are designed to protect you and Zoe's rights. Do you have any questions in relation to your rights?
No.
So the purpose of today's meeting is to review the IEP of Zoe Potts. This meeting will serve as Zoe's annual IEP meeting. Okay, to establish, in order to have an effective, productive meeting today, we have scheduled 1 hour to complete this meeting. The time is now 3:15. Mrs. Frazier will be our timekeeper for this meeting. If the meeting is not completed in that time frame, we will have to reconvene as soon as possible. So remember that this IEP document is a draft and can be changed during this meeting at any time.
Okay, so I'm going to share some strengths for Zoe. So she's very artistic and she's good at drawing, and she's also good at figurative writing. She likes to journal. She also likes astronomy and loves spending time with her little brother, and she likes to read him stories and show him how to make arts and crafts. So she's very creative. So as far as present levels, her strengths academically, she is struggling in math and science. So in math class, she has a 43%, and in science, it's a 5%. So this is tied directly to she has 5 out of 9 math assignments completed and 1 out of 8 science. So that is reflected in her grade. She has completed and turned in 4 out of 5 social studies assignments and 8 out of 9 English assignments. Even though she's often quiet and disengaged during class activities, she performs extremely well in district assessments in my English class. As of right now, her performance level, according to our assessments, is in the advanced level. Her current grade is an 85%, so she's been doing very well in English. I spoke with her teachers, so her other gen ed teachers, and they told me she's had sporadic attendance throughout the year, so it's been an issue, which has probably impacted her performance as well. But once she was placed in foster care, in the past 9 weeks, she's missed 7 days, so 3 of which were unexcused. So that's an improvement in her attendance.
And so as Zoe's psychologist, I'll be the psychologist when I'm wearing the hat. So, according to all of our testing and observations, it is apparent that Zoe possesses a very high linguistic, linguistic and interpersonal intelligence. You can tell that by her writing and her attention to others' feelings. She's very attentive to that. This is why she is so good at figurative writing, like I said, and being able to distinct other people's moods and feelings. So, she said twice. Also, according to the past Wyatt test, Zoe does not have a severe discrepancy between intelligence and achievement. So obviously her issues with academia is not because of a learning disability. Okay. She is, however, identified as having an emotional disability that hinders her from building or maintaining satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers. So, like I said earlier, she does have a strong interpersonal intelligence, but she's not building or maintaining these relationships. So Zoe has a general pervasive mood that's caused by chronic depression. So she's been depressed for a very long time. Zoe also does not effectively recognize, interpret, or control her fundamental emotions. As of right now, Zoe is taking 10 milligrams of Lexapro a day for her depression. Her current IEP allowed her to be late for first hour to take as an accommodation to take her dosage with the school nurse in the morning after breakfast. Zoe has demonstrated the side effect of drowsiness during her early morning classes when the medication is strongest, and the medication is intended to last 24 hours after taking. I'm suggesting, later on, we'll talk about it a little bit, but I'm not suggesting, excuse me, her doctor has suggested that the doses be increased to 20 milligrams a day, and I'm suggesting that we change from the morning to lunch.
I just want to interject a little bit. I have talked to our doctor extensively about the medications, and although I have agreed that this can be helpful to her, I also believe she's needing counseling or therapy sessions as well, so.
We can talk about, I know that we're, later on, we'll talk about the social worker having counseling sessions with her and talking with her. And I believe she's receiving through through the foster care agency, she's receiving counseling, or at least scheduled to receiving counseling, and so that is coming down the pipe. It's probably not here now because it's relatively new placement with you. And so I know that from what I've talked to different agencies that will be addressed. For the medication purposes, her doctor and I have talked about this, she is extremely out of balance right now. The chemical process going on in her brain, and it's causing, to the point which we'll talk about earlier, is to the point where it's causing self-harm, and she's getting feelings of depression that could lead to eventual, attempts of suicide, or even worse, succeeding. And so we've got to get that chemical imbalance in order, and the only way we can do that in a fast way right now is through medication. And yes, she is drowsy during school, and that's kind of why I'm suggesting that we change it from lunch or from after breakfast to after lunch, because typically in the morning she has been seen to be drowsy directly after the medication is taken, and so when it's strongest in her system, basically. And so this would put her through her core classes, especially science and math, where she's showing the most amount of struggle, and then so that it might get her into the later day. Something to look for is continued drowsiness in the afternoon. But we've got to get that chemical imbalance in hand, and then once we get to that point, yeah, we can start talking about, I think, at least that's a decision with her doctor, and everybody kind of come together and talk about, we've got to get away from this medication, but we've got to get that chemical imbalance balanced before we ever do that, because right now she's such in a dangerous spot that the only way to fix it, at least the fastest way to balance it, fix it's not a very good word, but at least balance it, is through medication. Okay. So now I am Zoe's special education teacher. So as a special education teacher, her strengths are, Zoe's produced awesome, amazing works of art. And she's also very compassionate with children with severe learning disabilities. We've had her in different classes in co-taught and inclusion with students with severe learning disabilities. And she's very patient with them. She's not easily irritated by these students, and she shows a lot of compassion and attention. Again, so present levels. So behavior-wise, 2 years ago when Zoe was identified with an ED disability, she was displaying violent outbursts that caused harm to herself and her former foster parents' property, and also her own property. She was breaking her own things that actually had a lot of meaning to her. It was discovered that she was also cutting herself along the wrist, and one such cut that needed immediate medical attention. So it was for self-harm, and I don't think it was stated earlier in earlier IEPs that it was not a suicide attempt, but the fact that it was so severe that she did need immediate medical attention. After the cuts were discovered, she was sent to Wyoming Behavioral Institute, also known as WPI. After about 3 weeks, she returned to us, and this was prior to her being identified as ED, but after she returned, her teachers and administrators and foster parents at the time, and the court, it wasn't a foster parent, but it was a court-appointed designee, we'd all determined as a team that she displayed emotional characteristics over a long period of time. To the marked degree, her behavior adversely affected her educational performance. So as a team, we made that decision. So as of present level, she has had 12 emotional breakdowns within the last 6 weeks. These breakdowns involved her distancing herself from her peers and her teachers, and then having uncontrollable feelings of sadness that eventually lead to her self-harming by way of cutting. In addition to emotional breakdowns, Zoe has had 3 physical outbursts in the last 6 weeks. By physical outbursts, I'm referring to screaming that she hates staff members, breaking school property, breaking her own property. And within the last 6 weeks, she has needed physical restraint from staff members twice. The restraint was performed by a staff member trained in level 2 MANT training for the reason that Zoe was so out of control that it was probable that she would cause harm to herself during emotional distress. And from restraint, she was restrained and then placed into a safe room is what happened. And somebody was on, there's a little window there, and they watched until she got to the point where at least she was calm enough that we could talk to her. But it was a while. With this emotional disabilities can be very complex and they vary considerably between case to case. However, for the most part, they can be categorized as 2 types of acting in and acting out. And so acting out types, which is kind of like the more typical that you typically see, they involve individuals acting maliciously towards others. And this is the cause of acting out. It also varies, but it's often the result of individuals not learning cause and effect and they have basically an underdeveloped conscience because they were never, there was never an appropriate consequence for something. And so, however, Zoe, that's not the case. Like, she is an acting in type of emotional disturbance. It's caused from years of depression. These individuals have an overinflated conscience. They feel guilty for events that they have no reason to feel guilty for. And these type of individuals typically cause harm to themselves rather than others. And it's caused from, basically poor parenting at times. Sometimes it's caused from genetics. With parents, over punishment. The consequence is overkill versus an appropriate consequence. And so what happens is these people start to lose self-worth. They feel less of themselves, and so every little thing that goes wrong, they start to internalize it in a sense, and they feel that they're letting people down, or they're the reason why people go away, or so on and so forth. Okay.
I'll start with strengths for Zoe too. I've also noticed that she's a really great artist. She draws amazing things, and especially with her calligraphy pen, that's been something that she's loved and has carried around a lot lately. She also writes really well for me too, and she can express herself really beautifully. So I see her twice a week right now. I see her once in an individual setting and then once in a group setting. And we're working on building some coping strategies. So instead of harming herself, thinking about other activities that she could do, or people she could talk to, or thoughts that she can, more positive thoughts she can have instead of negative thoughts that kind of set her up for self-harm. Over the last 6 weeks when she's seen me, she's had lots of those feelings of hopelessness and just lots of chaos, and just feeling really low in terms of her self-esteem and self-worth. So in 10 out of our 12 meetings, I've seen that. Over the last 6 weeks, she's had some form of self-harm on an average of once per week. So we're trying to work toward limiting that for her. In addition to the emotional outbursts that we're seeing from her and the self-harm, I am just seeing a lot of that negative self-talk. And so if we can address that and if we can kind of cut that off, I think that we would see a lot less of the outbursts and the harm that we're seeing from her. In our last meeting, we talked about math and science grades, and she is just feeling like she's stupid and she can't do it. So we're working on noticing strengths that she has in those settings, or strengths that she has elsewhere that she can use in those settings to help her, and resources that she has that she can go to help her get through it. She's feeling like she's not cared for, you know, which is understandable given her situation. So it's good that she's sharing that with me. And we're trying to identify teachers that really she can connect with and that are gonna help her feel like she's wanted. Yeah, she's opening up slowly. And I think the more that we see each other, the more that she'll be able to progress in those things that we're working on.
So Jesse, would you like to see, or talk about what you're seeing at home in relation to strengths and present levels?
Sure. Before I start though, I just want to make it clear, make sure everybody understands that even though I'm the foster parent, under federal guidelines, her dad, who is incarcerated, still has parental rights. Her mom was stripped of her by the courts, but this is regarding her education. So her dad has given me the right to be here, and the courts have also appointed me. So I have all the rights to Zoe's IEP, but I just so you that you're aware, he's gonna, in about 2 years, he may be in the picture, he may not be in the picture, but also he's on board with whatever I decide is best for her at this time. So I think it's been mentioned that Zoe's an incredible artist, and I always try to talk to her about that. And she also has great potential with her writing. Her diary, though, seems to be really dark and sad. So even though it's dark and sad, she does express herself very well through the figurative language she uses. She does prefer quiet time to write or draw, and she does seem to respond well to the positive encouragement and praise regarding her works of art. So that's one place that I think it goes well. She's tired of failing, especially in math. She thinks her math teacher hates her, and that's why she's failing. She's not seeing the disconnect between not handing in papers and that kind of thing. She's also failing science, she says, because she misses so much for court appointments, and then she does admit she just doesn't turn her work in for science. So that's a little different there. At home, like I said, she likes her alone time. I do invite her to family activities, but she rarely wants to join us. Occasionally though, she did join me, and last week she came to church with me, but a few weeks ago I took her out for ice cream, and I thought everything was going fine, but out of the blue she just threw her ice cream and screamed at me. So she told me she hated me and that she was just a paycheck for me, and wrongly so, but.
She had said something about that, I think, that situation in session. She had talked about missing her brother and thinking about her brother and wishing that he was able to be there with her for things like that. So yeah, maybe that's what was going on.
And her brother, which you're full aware of, was adopted officially by another family. And so legally, he is somebody else's child, even though they're still siblings. And so I think that was her one solid emotional connection to someone in the world, the one person that loved her unconditionally, and then is now been taken away from her, and so that is, and I could see how.
And she was also his caretaker.
Right.
A lot of the time, so she's
Yeah, that makes
concerned about
sense.
his welfare,
Yeah,
and even though she's young.
So it makes sense that she would have this uncontrollable outburst, because at the point where she probably on some level feels that it's her fault, that her brother was taken away, like she wasn't as good of a caretaker she could have been, or she didn't protect him from the authorities, like the authorities took away everybody else, and so I could see where she would have this overreaction. That makes sense. It goes right along with everything that we're seeing at school. So, so that's just something to, think about. So the best thing that you can do to reassure her is, you're not gonna go anywhere that you are. So the best thing to do is just like continue to support her. She's, this little girl has never had a stable home, and she's probably at some point in time thinking that you're going to get rid of her, and that's something you need to look for, and she's going to most likely try to sabotage your relationship, because everybody in her life has been taken away from her. Her father got taken away from her, her mother got taken away from her, her brother got taken away from her. She has no control. She's not no control. But what she does have control about is if she could sabotage your guys' relationship to the point where she's going to try to push you away because she wants it to, she wants it to be her decision. So she can make that choice because she has no control in anything. So the best thing that you can do is support her, continue with the positive praise, continue with these things. The other side of this coin is this girl has never, if you think about the hierarchy of needs, and you're thinking Maslow's hierarchy of needs, she has never had any of the bottom 3 tiers of the pyramid. And so, so if you the lower level, hierarchy of needs, this means that she's rarely had a psychological feeling of consistent place to eat or sleep. No. Which means she's never felt truly safe. She's never had a consistent definition of what family actually should be. For the first time in her life, she's now feeling physically and psychologically, for the most part, safe, at least physically. And so it will take time to build enough trust between you guys in order to develop, to get up to that next tier. Eventually we would love to get to the point where we're improving her self-esteem. But that self-esteem is not going to come if safety and security is not fulfilled. She's never had that. So she's now at this basically the second tier. Her safety, she's safe and secure. She doesn't believe it yet because her little brother just got taken away. So as long as once she's going to feel safe and secure, you're probably going to see some sabotage behaviors, kind of like what do they call it? Where it kind of like ends. It's like the last blowout of. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Where it's like you see a behavior, it's fixed. It seems like it's fixed, and then all of a sudden it's like an aftershock. They regress. It's kind of like it's like the last huge blow up of that behavior, and then it kind of dissipates before we move on to the next level. She's got to go through those levels of safety, security, psychological love in order to get to that self-esteem and self-actualization. She's never had a chance to. So hopefully somewhere down the road she will feel confident enough to reach that self-actualization, which is like the morality and problem solving. If you think about that, morality always in human nature is second to survival. And this little girl has always been survival mode. She's never been out of survival mode. And so why would she focus on morality? And with morality becomes appropriate behavior. And so in that problem solving, being able to fix the situations that she's in. So eventually, we'd like to get her there, but that's where we're at now.
Sounds about right. Yep.
So as her case manager, and special education teacher, so for special factors, her behavior does not impede her behavior does impede her learning and the learning of others occasionally when she's having those outbursts. For extended school year, it's not recommended at this time. I doubt it will be for summer, and then some of the other stuff that goes along with that. Probably mumbling. Least restrictive environment. Zoe needs specialized instruction for unwanted behavior replacement. All of her general electives will be taught in the general education setting. Zoe will receive one-on-one specialized instruction for behavior replacement in the ACE room. Zoe is inside the regular class for 88% or more of her day. So it basically turns out to be about one class period, that she is out of general ed. So for a measurable annual goal for behavior, as a baseline, we're looking at Zoe exhibits these feelings of hopelessness that Tara talked about earlier, and emotional chaos and low self-worth on an average of 5 out of every 6 days. She also exhibits on an average of 1 physical outburst for every 2 weeks. And by physical outbursts, I mean they include all or some of the following behaviors: throwing herself to the ground, screaming, breaking property, yelling profanities, or making hostile threats to herself. So that's defined in the IEP as a physical outburst. Zoe exhibits on average 2 emotional breakdowns a week, and as an emotional breakdown is defined here, that it involves her distancing herself from peers and teachers, followed by having uncontrollable feelings of sadness that eventually lead to self-harming by cutting. That's kind of the thing that we really need to nip in the bud. Okay, so as a measurable goal, in group session, Zoe will participate and identify at least 1 positive self-affirmation herself. She will demonstrate no more than 1 physical outburst, on average, no more than 1 physical outburst for every month of school. She will reduce emotional breakdowns, which was defined earlier, as well as physical outbursts was defined earlier, that do not lead to self-harm, to an average of 3 for every 1 month of school. And then when Zoe is in session with the social worker, she will identify a minimum of, and I believe that's group session, right? Sorry, can I borrow your pen? Fix that. Okay. We'll identify a minimum of 3 strategies to replace self-harm. Okay. So to data to support the progress, Zoe has 8 disciplinary actions that resulted in 10 days of in-school suspension and 6 office referrals. 6 of the 8 disciplinary actions and office referrals were for truancy. They couldn't find her. She went and hid somewhere, or she didn't show up to where she was supposed to be. Zoe has not improved her behavior from the beginning of the school year. It was mentioned that she is slowly but surely opening up during counseling sessions with the social worker. She did not meet her behavioral goals for reducing outbursts and breakdowns. And it has been noted also to keep in mind that it's been recommended by Zoe's doctor to increase her dosage of antidepressants from 10 milligrams of Lexapro to 20 milligrams. And we talked about that earlier. Zoe's also missed 40 days of school in an 18-week period. 15 of Zoe's 40 absences were because of temporary placement at WBI. She had another, I actually think that's incorrect. I think it was 20 absences were because of, 15 of the 40. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. I missed the 15 there. I was looking at the 40. Yes, 15 of Zoe's 40. Yes, that is correct. Okay, Zoe's little brother was officially, and then also to add to this, Zoe's little brother was officially adopted by another family 6 months ago.
Right, so based on her present levels and everything we've seen from Zoe, for the gen ed environment, accommodations for her to be more successful would be to have individual and highly structured kind of settings for her in familiar areas where she's not having a lot of change, so having some more predictability for her since she's not had much of that. Daily check-in with the case manager, special education teacher, to assess her anxiety and where she's at. allow 5 minutes after lunch recess to take her medication, so switching that time, so then she has that opportunity, won't be late for class and counted tardy. Use positive reinforcement plan for her, an option of small group testing, and allowed extended time to complete assignments. So that'll give her a little more time to work through some of the things she's missing in those classes. For her special education services, she'll be assigned a para-professional to assist when she's in those situations, kind of identifying help her find those triggers before she gets to the point of self-harm. So to kind of address it head-on right away before we get to that point. So for the resource room, it's a determination of the IEP committee members that in addition to their regular classroom, Zoe will receive intensive one-on-one self-harming behavior replacement instruction from a special education teacher outside the general education classroom 5 times per week for 25 minutes per session. So it'll be a total of 125 minutes per week. And so this additional instruction will target the replacement behavior for self-harming. So to really focus on that so we can extinguish that behavior. And so that she's identifying activities that are healthy and positive, appropriate alternatives for her to do. And there's always ego throughout the positive reinforcement activities.
I'm gonna continue to see Zoe. I'm gonna change my time a little bit. So instead of seeing her twice a week, 30 minutes each for a total of 60 minutes, I'm gonna see her for 20 minutes a day. I think seeing her every day and checking in with her would be helpful. And we'll discuss and implement replacement behaviors for her physical and emotional outbursts, and start working on developing some of that self-esteem and confidence. Also, we're gonna work on a little bit of study skills and just her attendance, making sure that she's here. I think that as soon as she can get into counseling outside of school, that would be really helpful for her too, just to have another support in place.
Absolutely. And then, you know, to add to that, one of the reasons why we're increasing time with Tara is because we're really kind of in crisis mode right now. The fact that she's self-harming, and we don't want it to get worse than it is. So if we could, you know, so right now, that to me is our biggest priority is to minimize self-harming. We would hate for, it only takes one escalation to really cause irreparable harm. So as a caseworker, or case manager, are we all in agreement with Zoe's goals and accommodations and related services?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments anybody would like to make before we conclude Zoe's IEP?
Yeah, Zoe's father will be getting out of prison in 2 years, and so it's unknown what the courts will do with custody as far as parental rights. So keep in mind that there is a history of abuse. Right now, Mr. Potts has all of his parental rights in regard to the IEP. So a copy of this meeting will be sent to him through the mail,
post
yeah.
office and our mail, yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Any other comments? Okay. So Jesse, would you like to stay and wait for a copy of the archive meeting, or would you like me to send you a copy via email?
If you'll just email it, and then I can print off the final one and send it to him.
Perfect. Okay, so if there's no more comments, I think that concludes this IEP. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for coming, guys.